Okay, so we're diving into the Nightingale, but not just like a plot summary. We're using this book to like really experience World War II France.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Think of it as history, but from the inside out, not just dates and battles.
Right, exactly. More about like what life was like for regular people, the day-to-day struggles, stuff you wouldn't necessarily get in a textbook.
And the Nightingale gives us this really personal look at it, you know, through these two sisters, Vianne and Isabel. And they both react to the war in totally different ways.
Okay, now I'm even more interested. Tell me about these sisters.
So Vianne's the older one. When the war starts, she's a young wife and mother living this quiet life in a small village. And her story is all about like inner strength, resilience, and just the struggle to protect your family when everything's falling apart around you.
Wow. And what about Isabel?
So Isabel is the younger sister, and she is, let's just say, a firecracker. She's living in Paris when the Nazis invade, and she gets swept up in the resistance, which obviously comes with a whole other set of dangers and risks.
So we're seeing both sides of the story then. The people who stayed home and just tried to survive and the people who actively fought back. This is already fascinating.
And that's what makes the Nightingale so powerful. It shows this whole range of human responses to, an impossible situation. And it really makes you think about like how one person's choices can have these huge ripple effects.
Okay, now give me the good stuff. What are some specific moments in the book that really bring this experience to life?
Well, there's this one scene. It's when Isabel first comes face to face with Nazi soldiers marching into her town. And she does something pretty defiant. It's this really powerful moment that shows how instantly the occupation changed daily life for everyday people.
And how about Vianne? What kind of challenges does she face?
Well, she discovers that her friend Rachel is Jewish, and she's faced with this really tough decision. Protect her friend or risk everything by helping her escape. It was a constant struggle for so many French citizens during the war.
Oh man, that's heavy. I can't imagine the pressure of making that kind of choice, especially when you're trying to keep your own family safe.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the Nightingale does so well. It really dives into the moral complexities of war and shows how people were forced to make impossible choices. It's not just about the big moral dilemmas either. We see the day-to-day grind of scarcity and rationing.
Right. The book really brings it home. The food shortages, the limited supplies. It makes you understand how difficult life was for people during that time.
Yeah, it really does. It shows how resourceful and resilient they had to be. They were constantly having to adapt to a changing world. The book also talks about how the presence of German soldiers was just, everywhere, and how it affected people's lives, like the restrictions on movement, the curfews, and then there's the psychological toll of living under constant surveillance.
It sounds completely suffocating, and it makes you wonder how people even managed to find the strength to resist.
The Nightingale shows that there were a lot of different reactions to all of this pressure. Some people were afraid, and they chose to collaborate with the Nazis. Others joined the resistance movement, knowing they were risking everything.
It must have been a constant internal battle, trying to figure out what was right and wrong in such a chaotic world.
Absolutely. There were no easy answers. What might seem like a small act of resistance to one person could have huge consequences for another. It's really fascinating how the novel explores all the shades of gray. So tell me, how does Isabel get involved in the resistance? She seems like she's got a lot of fire in her belly.
Well, she doesn't start out as some big resistance hero. It starts small. She's distributing anti-Nazi leaflets, and she's risking getting arrested just to spread information.
And that's how it often happens, isn't it? Small acts of defiance that slowly escalate. But it's those small acts that can spark a bigger movement.
And what does Isabel end up doing?
Isabel becomes a passeur, a guide. She helps downed Allied airmen escape over the Pyrenees Mountains into Spain. It's incredibly dangerous work, requiring courage, cunning, and a network of trusted contacts. Think about it. She's not only helping the resistance, but also putting herself in harm's way to save the lives of others.
Wow, that's intense. The book actually describes her harrowing journey across the Pyrenees. Talk about bravery.
It's a remarkable story, full of close calls and incredible feats of endurance. She guides these airmen through treacherous terrain, evading German patrols and facing the harsh elements.
That's amazing. But what about Vianne? Does she stay on the sidelines while all this is happening?
Vianne's transformation is equally remarkable, though more internal. She starts out focused on keeping her family safe, trying to stay below the radar. But as the war progresses, she finds herself drawn into the resistance too.
How so?
A Jewish child is entrusted to her care, and she risks everything to protect him. She hides him from the Nazis, even when her own life is in danger. It's a testament to the quiet heroism of so many ordinary people who defied the regime.
That scene where she has to pretend that Ari is her son, Daniel, is just gut-wrenching.
It really underscores the depth of her commitment, the sacrifices she's willing to make for someone else's child. And it shows how the war forced people to make impossible choices, to redefine what it means to be a family.
Both sisters experience loss and trauma, but in different ways. How does the novel portray the lasting effects of the war on them?
There's a poignant scene at the end where the sisters reunite after the war. They've both been through so much, and they're forever changed by their experiences.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, what kind of scars does war leave even when it's over? What does it take to rebuild your life after something so devastating?
These are exactly the kinds of questions The Nightingale prompts us to consider. It's not just a historical novel. It's a story about resilience, about the enduring power of the human spirit, about the choices we make in the face of unimaginable adversity.
It's wild to think that in the middle of all this chaos, there's this German officer, Captain Beck, billeted at Vianne's house. Talk about adding another layer of tension.
Captain Beck is fascinating because he's not your stereotypical villain. He represents the moral complexities of war, especially on an individual level. He challenges the idea of everyone on one side being good and the other being bad.
Right, like in that scene where Beck helps Vianne get medicine for her daughter, it makes you question everything you think you know about people caught up in war.
Exactly. And that's what makes The Nightingale so powerful. It forces us to see beyond the black and white, to recognize the humanity in everyone, even those who might appear to be our enemies.
It's a good reminder that things aren't always so simple. But let's get back to the sisters. It's incredible to think about the courage it took for both of them to make the choices they did, especially in a world where right and wrong weren't always clear-cut.
What's fascinating here is that their stories highlight the different forms resistance can take. Isabel's is bold and visible, full of action and danger. Vianne's is more subtle, but no less significant. She's resisting in her own way through acts of kindness, compassion, and defiance within the confines of her daily life.
It makes you realize that even in the darkest of times, even when you feel powerless, there are always choices to be made. And maybe those everyday acts of courage are just as important as the grand gestures.
Absolutely. And The Nightingale reminds us that those choices, no matter how small they seem, can have a profound impact on the lives of others.
So what does this all mean for us today? Why should we care about these stories from so long ago?
The Nightingale isn't just about World War II France. It's about the human condition. It's about the choices we make under pressure, the sacrifices we're willing to make for what we believe in, the enduring strength of the human spirit.
And it forces us to confront those uncomfortable questions, doesn't it? What would we do in similar circumstances? Would we have the courage to resist?
This raises an important question that goes beyond the historical context. What does it mean to resist in our own lives? It could be speaking out against injustice, standing up for what's right, or simply refusing to be complicit in something we know is wrong.
It's a powerful message, and one that's incredibly relevant today, even though the war ended decades ago.
The themes of The Nightingale: courage, resilience, moral responsibility, the power of ordinary people, these are timeless and universal. And that's why this novel continues to resonate with readers long after they've finished the last page. It leaves you with a lingering sense of hope, a belief that even in the face of darkness, the human spirit can endure.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into The Nightingale, here's something to think about. The book gives us two very different models of resistance, both heroic in their own way. Which one speaks to you more? And what acts of resistance, big or small, might you be called to in your own life? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.